season extension is real easy if you've got a high tunnel in your backyard. Of course, that comes with a pretty decent price tag. This is the high tunnel at the Hamilton Community Garden. Note it's got a lot of room. It's got a lot of room for storage. It's a protected environment. It's got some water collection in the back. But again, it comes with a big price tag. So what do you do if you don't have all that money? Let's talk about other ways that you can make this happen in your backyard garden. Hey everybody, I'm Greg Potter. I'm with the Civic Garden Center, and these are our Victory Garden Hub Garden classes. So welcome back. It's the very beginning of September. We're going to be talking about how to push that growing season on beyond that frost date. So we're going to be talking to Joshua Jones, our growing guru. And stay tuned after this video. We're going to follow it up with a how-to on to build one of these hoop house low tunnels. So take it away, Josh. How do we grow in this?
So growing in the fall past frost, we need to make sure we insulate our crops one way or another. The fall is wonderful because the pest pressure starts to reduce. The vegetables get a little bit sweeter, but we have to take some added measures to make sure that we're protecting them. So one way we do that is with what we'll call a low tunnel. Oftentimes you'll hear them called hoop houses. A low tunnel is just a smaller version of a hoop house. Typically it only covers one row. It doesn't span multiple rows. So this is a great example. It's basically constructed with two different pieces. You have what we'll call your ribs. This is a simple, it looks like 1/2-inch PVC. And you have your covering. And there are several different types of covering that we can use that we'll discuss. And the benefit of row cover, it adds heat. It protects us from the frost and it keeps the beds a few degrees warmer. The issue with that is if you get a really hot day, which here in Cincinnati, our temperatures fluctuate greatly, you want to make sure if you have this over something that is heat sensitive, such as broccoli or something like that, on a really hot day, you want to make sure that you're pulling this back. All of our fall crops, our brassicas, a lot of our root crops, all should be protected because they go into those October, November months before they're ready. So you want to make sure that we get those covered. The great thing about the light cover is it doesn't trap as much heat, but it has a good amount of frost protection to it. If you want to go to the medium cover, you'll get more frost protection, but you'll also produce more heat. So again, when those temperatures really start to get hot in the day, you want to make sure if you're using a heavier cover, you have to pull it off. Now, alternatively, if it's getting really cold and we're getting into those October, November months, you can actually change this row cover out to a thin gauge plastic. So a nice clear plastic, much that you see on greenhouses. The issue with the plastic is you must be very careful because it'll actually raise the temperature underneath in the hoop house anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees. So when it's cold at night, that's wonderful, but if you get a 70 or an 80 degree day, you're now somewhere between 90 and 100 degrees inside. But you really have to make sure that you're pulling those off in the middle of the day so we're not cooking our plants.
So do you have any recommendations if they decide they're going to use plastic? How often should they be checking?
I would say every day, certainly. And I will come and make sure, I'll check the forecast for the day. Typically, if it's going to get over 70 degrees that day, I'll go ahead and pull early in the morning. I will pull that plastic off, and then I'll come and recover it in the evening. When you recover it in the evening, you want to make sure you cover it early enough that it's going to get some sunlight to produce the heat to warm it up. If you go and cover it when it's already dark, it's not really able to solarize and trap that heat.
So have you heard of people burning up their crops under a plastic hoop house?
I have certainly burned up my own crops under a plastic hoop house. And like I said, once you get past that 70 degree threshold, I think you're really starting to kind of be in the danger zone. So how I typically deploy my low tunnels is at the beginning of the season, when we still have some warm days, intermittent warm days, I'll just stick with the row cover because the mesh row cover, because typically we don't need a lot of frost protection in the early part of the fall. And then when I hit mid-October is when I'll typically switch it over to get that more protective plastic layer. And the plastic layer, 6 mil is what they use on typical greenhouses, but I've gone down as low as a 3 mil plastic, so you don't have to, splurge for the really thick plastics. The thinner plastics will work. They just typically won't last as many seasons. It's painter's plastic. And as far as when you're buying it, I try to buy double the width of my bed. So if this is a 4-foot bed, typically you can get away with 7 feet, but I like to have a lot of extra just in case. That way I'm not pulling things super taut. So double the width of the bed, I think, is the appropriate width. Yeah, the good thing about, especially if we're protecting our crops, is the soil, the temperature doesn't fluctuate in the soil as greatly as it does the foliage up top. So if it's 50 degrees outside, that might really, our foliage might really struggle, but the roots down in the ground are still fantastic. So I use the soil as my refrigerator, because if I pull all these all at once because it's getting cold, then I have to figure out, I have to eat all of them. I have to process them all. But if we keep them covered, our foliage might look worse for wear, but the roots underneath the soil are still pristine. So don't feel like you have to go and harvest everything at once because the temperatures are getting a little bit cooler. And with your carrots especially, which is what we're in front of here, are very cold tolerant. What I tell people is plants don't grow in the fall, in the later fall. They need to be well established, but they can survive, and you can use that kind of as your outdoor refrigerator. The late fall is really just used for sustaining. Like Greg mentioned, we can use it as our refrigerator and go intermittently harvest throughout the later end of the fall.
And the great thing about root crops is you get towards wintertime, those plants are pushing those sugars down into those roots.
Oh yeah.
So they get sweeter and nicer tasting the colder the temperature.
Fall carrots, fall radishes, fall kohlrabi and beets, all the root crops are much, much sweeter. And really that goes the same for cabbages and broccolis. Things that produce the part of the plant that we eat, if they produce them in the cool weather, which is what happens in fall, they're much sweeter. If we plant them in the spring, they're producing that edible part in the heat of the summer, and they tend to start getting bitter. They tend to start getting more bitter. So fall gardening is definitely much sweeter than spring gardening, and quite frankly, it's a little bit easier as well.
So thanks, Josh. So there's no reason not to keep growing. September is just the start of when we think about harvesting.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to show you a little bit today about how easy it is to build what we call a low tunnel on one of your raised beds. So we've already got a lot of it constructed, but I'll kind of show you the last kind of steps you need to take, which is exactly the steps that go all the way through. So the material, these are called the hoops. The material that we're using for the hoops is 1/2-inch PVC material. It's very inexpensive. This is a 10-foot length. I think a couple of bucks will buy you a 10-foot length. And in this case, we are going to cut them 8 feet long. So we'll cut 2 foot off of that 10 foot. So we'll measure off our 8 feet. It's set to cut. You can cut it with a hacksaw, you can cut it with a small wood saw, or if you're going to be cutting a lot of them, they actually make PVC cutters. And these things they work awfully slick, and they're relatively inexpensive. That right there cuts a nice clean edge, and that gives us our 8-foot piece that we need. Now, don't throw these pieces away, because I'm going to show you a use for them here in just a second. What else you're going to need is you're going to need pipe clamps. Now it's a 1/2-inch piece of pipe, but we want you to get 3/4-inch pipe clamps. That'll give you enough room to insert this, and you can take them in and out as you need. You put the pipe clamps, I prefer inside the frame. Some people build them outside the frame, but I like them inside the frame. That way the raised bed itself helps hold your pressure together. Where'd it go? So we've got one in each end. You take this 8-foot piece of pipe, down in. Bend it over. We've got that done. This is a 10-foot long bed. We've got that done 5 times across this 10-foot bed. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use those hoops to support a material covering for that. But before we get there, let me show you something that you can do with your offcuts next season when you start growing. Let's say you're going to grow some cucumbers or maybe some beans in here. You can take a couple of these short pieces, put them right back in that same hole. Get some bamboo or some short sticks. Right down in there. You can tie off a piece of fencing to make a trellis. You can do this at any place that you've got those conduit holders all the way down through there. So you've got a lot of flexibility. You can turn them sideways. This gives you a lot of options to do with your garden bed. Let's get back to a low tunnel. Put our hoop back in. Then we're going to talk about the material. But this is called row cover, and it's a very versatile material. It comes in a lot of different weights. This is a medium weight. This happens to be Agribond 19. You can see it's somewhat translucent. It lets sunlight through, and it's very lightweight. We already have some stretched out of it across there. I'm going to pull it back and show you how we attach it. If you're doing this on a windy day, you might need a couple of people, but so far today I've been able to do this by myself. So stretch it across your hoops. What I like to use to attach them are these binder clips. You can get them at any office supply store. Sometimes your big box stores will have them. It's literally that simple. You go around maybe 3 or 4 per hoop. And then what's left to do is to hold down the sides. So I'm going to put a board on this side all the way down the length. This side over here, I'm actually going to put a few bricks there. So this side will be the side that's easier to take on and lift up and work inside your box. And again, a binder clamp works great for this. Pull it together, clamp it to itself. And if you get a lot of activity, wind activity, you could put something right there against there to hold that as well. So there you have it. That's a low tunnel. This is actually going to potentially help you keep crops all winter long. Thanks, everybody.